Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar, which is entitled Regain Control Over Your Microsoft Teams Environment. And I'd first of all like to introduce myself. I'm Anthony Charman. I'm a Microsoft business consultant working in the Microsoft team at Computer World. And David, do you just want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Francard. I'm out of Canada, past consultant as well, much like Anthony, but now with Orchestry, which is a product we'll talk a bit about today. Nice to meet you.
So just before David kind of gets us into the depths of the product, I'm just going to set the scene a little bit. So Microsoft Teams, let me just, sorry, my PowerPoint's not moving. Microsoft Teams was launched in March 2017, and it introduced lots of new ways to do things within the IT environment, lots of new ways to communicate. It gave us the ability to create an organizational-wide intranet, have video meetings, which many of us were doing on Zoom before that, integrate telephony or our PBX systems in there and introduce chat into the work environment. Gave us lots of new ways to do things around collaborating. So the whole concept of Microsoft Teams as your hub for work, and the channels within that, the ability to co-author documents and work together even when you're apart, were functions that came in with Teams at that point. And it also gave us some easy to use cloud-based storage. So we started to look at bringing things away from our traditional kind of computer room-based storage, physical storage, into the Microsoft Cloud with SharePoint. And it was ideal for, as it was based in the cloud, it was ideal to support remote working. So that was a couple of years before we even knew what the word pandemic meant or even talked about pandemic at all. Then in 2019, we were hit by the pandemic, and all of a sudden, all of these tools that were available to us through Microsoft Teams became very relevant. And because everyone was sent home and everyone had to start working from home. The problem with that was, even though we'd had access to that stuff for 2 years, not many people had made much progress with adopting Microsoft 365 and Teams during that period. And all of a sudden, we all rushed at it. And there was no time to really discuss what we were going to use from the Microsoft 365 toolkit, how we were going to use it, what teams we were going to create, what standards we we're going to have within our organization. And there was no time for training. So most people learnt how to use it themselves in their own different ways. Most people just did, learned how to set up a meeting and conduct a video meeting over it. And it turned into, it was just a recipe for chaos. We had a whole new feature-rich set of suite of software that we could use within our organization. We were forced to use it because we were pushed away from our central offices. And it just happened. It was a recipe for chaos, as I've put there. And it's time now to start bringing that back and getting that under control. So that's what Orchestry enables us to do. When I first looked at Orchestry, the first, one of the challenges working with organizations, with teams, was setting standards and trying to get under control the environments that they had already. And one of the first things I saw when we started to work with Orchestry and load up Orchestry into our system here as a demonstration environment was this dashboard, which was information that I've been trying to find for my clients for a long time. How many teams do they have? How many teams do they have that are inactive, that haven't been used for a period of time? How many external users are supported in Teams? How many public channels do we have? How many private channels? And this dashboard was just, a real godsend to me to enable me to work with my clients and to help them get their environment under control. And that's just one of the core elements of Orchestry. David's going to take us through a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation to give us a bit more background than I've provided, but also going to take us through a live demonstration of the functionality that we have within Orchestry. Key things we're going to look at is kind of how do we manage the creation of teams. One of the temptations, or one of the things that happened when we implemented Teams in organizations, was that we either let everyone create as many teams as they wanted and let everyone have a free-for-all there, or we just locked it down so tight that we had to put lots of procedures and authorizations in places before we'd allow people to create teams. That's something that Orchestry nails. Then managing the life cycle of teams. When does a team become, when is it no longer needed? How do we remind people it's no longer needed? How do we police the kind of governance of teams? How do we make sure that the naming conventions that we agree on are abided with? And how do we kind of manage the ownership of teams? And how do we report on what our teams' environments are doing? So I'm going to hand over to David now to take us a little bit more on this journey around the Orchestry product. If there are any questions as you're going along, then do put those into the chat box and we'll make sure that we pick those up and answer those as we go. But I'd now like to introduce David to you and let him take over.
Thank you, Anthony. I'll see if I can get my PowerPoint live to launch my presentation. Let me know when you see that coming through there, Anthony.
Yep, I can see your PowerPoint. I think I'm seeing your the smaller screen of it. Let me just check. Megan, can you see that? Yeah, it's all good.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
All right. I like this new mode. It allows people to move forward on their own if they think I'm moving too slowly. So nice to meet everyone. I'll do as short of a little blurb here on Orchestry before we start, and then I'll spend the majority of the time on the demo, and that usually leads to some good questions and good conversation. So please, like Anthony said, any questions, leave them in the chat, and I'll pause as quickly as possible and try to make sure we get your question answered. So one of the things that we did with Orchestry when we were launching the product is we did a lot of research actually with customers. And we talked to, I think, over 100 different companies and tried to find out what are the things that you are really struggling with. And this was actually pre-pandemic, as Anthony said. Even pre-pandemic, we were noticing that there's kind of these four main recurring problems or challenges that organizations were facing. And it did not really seem to matter whether you were a small or medium-sized company or a behemoth of a company, to put it that way. We kind of have these four main challenges that we kept hearing about. And so we built the product around these four pillars of adoption, templating, governance, and lifecycle management. And I'll tell you a bit as I go through these from my kind of business consulting hat, wearing that, and why some of these were very challenging, even when you had a lot of help and expertise around organizations, you still struggled with these issues. And I think the first big one was definitely adoption. And we see that always whenever we look at customers that even they're just considering Orchestry, we talk a little bit about what they're doing. And we find that this is a really big challenge about what tool should I use when. And that kind of is probably the best way to summarize, I think, the current challenge. And the old approach for solving this was training, and lots of training, right? But I think, and Anthony can, I'm sure, speak to this as well, the proliferation of the number of tools that now make up that M365 suite are so huge. The number of different tools, many of them overlapping in a lot of functionality, is so complex and hard to explain that even if you're someone like in the field every day, like myself or like Anthony, even for us, it's hard to stay up to date and to keep up with the changes. So how do you internally create a training program around that when it's already moving at that rapid of a pace? So that's a really big challenge. And I think one of the main ways we feel we can solve that is with a very robust templating engine. And instead of asking users what tools they need to use, we can actually come up with workspace templates, take the technical piece out of the equation, and just ask users, what are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And that is now a question that anyone is now better equipped to answer. I'm just trying to launch a project, or maybe I'm working on design for a new product, or maybe I am just looking for a space to work with my departmental colleagues. Those are questions that anyone can answer. So with Orchestry, we can come up with from a very simple to a very, very complex template of a workspace, and multiple different kinds of templates to meet different needs. And what we find is that we then have much better adoption, because as part of these templates, we can build in some of the new tool set as the appetite and the readiness internally is ready for those new tools. And that way everyone's using a more consistent pattern and playbook for how that big M365 suite should be used.
I think, David, it would be fair to say that Microsoft did have a Teams, or does have a Teams templating functionality, but it was very, very
Yes.
limited in the way in which it can do things. Yeah.
Very good point. Yes, that's always good to remind ourselves that part of it is always growing and it's improving. We're seeing that on the SharePoint list side, we're seeing it in the Teams side, but it's still quite limited. And for many organizations, it still does not give them the governance controls that they want. So that brings us to governance, right? And I think governance for many organizations, for many business users, is really a bad word. No one really has had very positive experiences with companies trying to implement governance plans, because many people see these as friction, right? Or as roadblocks to them just trying to get their work done. So the approach we try to take with Orchestry is to try to make that governance structure still very robust, but largely invisible to the end users, making it imperceptible and frictionless so that we have governance rules built into the templates. Users can still work within those templates and request different pieces of those templates being added or removed, but we're not leaving this open for anyone to do anything that they like, which we've seen leads to some pretty nasty outcomes, as Anthony alluded to. Many companies with the pandemic were in an emergency state, having to turn the switch on something like Teams, sometimes in an overnight timeline with no preparation. And, of course, that's going to lead to some challenges, right? And we see one client, for example, where we saw like a 40% growth of their teams in 2 months. And when you really dig down into it, it's a kind of a misleading number, because you end up seeing, a huge proportion, like with this client, almost 1,000 teams that literally just had a single person in them, right? So you have really a misuse of some of these tools when that lack of governance is really there to support. The other piece, of course, that we want to make sure we can do, and a lot of tools struggle with this, Microsoft is obviously not compelled to put a lot of focus on things like sunsetting and archival of old workspaces, because they're happy for people to create extremely large environments. It's a good outcome for Microsoft, but it's not necessarily a good outcome for your organization, right? If you have thousands and thousands of teams, 3/4 of which really should be archived because they're not active anymore. And while we spend a lot of time talking about the creation phase with Orchestry, when you look at the whole life cycle of a team, of a project, for example, the time that it spends in these two phases here is obviously much larger than just the small blip that made up its creation. So we'll talk a little bit about the dashboard like Anthony showed, and how we can put policies in place to make sure that during the active usage phase, that team is humming along. And then when it starts to slow down and that project comes to a close, or whatever it may be, comes to a close, we have the right information to make good decisions about archiving and reducing that sprawl. So ultimately, I think where Orchestry fits is kind of between these two extremes that Microsoft provides us, which for most organizations are too far along the end of the spectrum to really be helpful, where you either have self-service, which is what we saw with a lot of organizations with the pandemic, just turn it on, we have no choice, and you lead to people and anyone being able to create anything, and you end up with a lot of teams called Anthony's lunch test, right? And then you have the reverse of this, which is just extremely tightly controlled, where only administrators can create things. And this just leads to massive roadblocks for everyone, and doesn't really lead to a good feeling in anyone in that business, feeling like everything has to go through this really kind of gate that no one really understands. So we kind of try to put ourselves in the middle and still allow self-service, but within kind of some general guidelines or boundaries, so that we can make sure that we're not kind of going into this chaos state. So before I jump into the demo, I'll kind of just highlight some of the main capabilities we'll talk about around creation, making sure that we can template, put naming rules in place that are dynamic, approval processes, looking up other workspaces that may be similar to try to avoid people duplicating things that already exist. Then during the in-flight usage, a lot of monitoring tools and insights, as well as a directory for users to be able to find workspaces more easily. And then a lot of capabilities around the archiving and retention side of things. And just to give you guys a sneak peek of what's coming, I think the big next piece that we're working on over the summer months is another loud cry that we've heard from the masses and from all the people we talk to, which is, how in the world am I meant to manage guests? Many organizations have guests, external collaborators that they need to let into their environment, but they don't really have good tools to effectively manage the risk of letting those people in and making sure that over time, they're not just building up this mass of external users in their tenant that may or may not still belong. So we're working on a new tailored, dedicated dashboard for guests to give administrators kind of up to the minute views of what guests are in the environment, what are they doing, what is their status, and which of them we may even recommend you should actually get rid of, right? Because they may no longer have access to anything, but they're just floating in your Azure directory. So that's a little sneak peek of that. And if anyone has any questions about any of that, please don't hesitate, and give me a moment here while I switch screens into a live demo that will hopefully make this a little bit more interesting for everyone. So I'm going to switch screens here. In a moment, you should see Teams in all its glory in a web browser, so that I don't kick myself out of this video call. You should see I'm in a team here called Orchestra Project Template, and that's where I'll start my demo here. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that we don't just support very basic templates like you will see with out-of-the-box native teams right now. Let's say you have a project template, and as part of that project template, you might have great integration built in with the attached SharePoint site. Maybe you have a beautiful welcome page like this that's showing everyone all the latest up-to-date information, even on their tasks. Maybe you have a pre-built OneNote that has a lot of different sections and structures in it. It looks like I can't open it right now, but that different sections of meeting minutes that allow you to see kind of maybe all the different things that you would typically see in a project. Let's see, I'll give that one more try. OneNote's giving me trouble today. So that's something that we have support for. You might also have other pages for showing like the status of the project. You might have put in place a definition of who's holding different roles on the project. And then going into things like maybe like Planner, you might actually have a beautiful built out template that you want every project to start with. And I have this organized by buckets and labels and even subtasks and all the great things that you can do in Planner. All of this can be part of your template. So we're not just talking about a basic team. We're talking about a team that could have integrations with SharePoint, Planner, OneNote, documents, templated documents, and all those things that make up a great workspace. So I have all of that built out, and I have even different channels, and you've noticed I've been clicking through different custom tabs that I've attached to these channels. So maybe I have a help and support channel where I pre-pin some training material, right? Maybe I have a deliverables channel where I'm going to pre-pin some tabs for some of the very core deliverables that everyone is constantly looking for in my project. All of that makes up this workspace that I'm going to use as a template now in Orchestra. So what I'll show you now is I'll jump out of Teams and I'll show you how we can actually configure this workspace in Orchestra. I'll try to zoom in a little bit here. And you'll see that in Orchestra, this is in the management section of Orchestra, I have a whole section that allows me to define my workspace templates. And if I go into templates, which is where I am now, let me open the one that I just had open for you, which is, for me, it's a type of project where I'm actually going to allow external users versus potentially another one I have above, which is not going to allow that. It's only going to allow for internal collaboration. Let me open this and give you a little quick run through of some of just a few of the ways we can configure the template. Of course, we support not only Teams, but also SharePoint workspaces. So you can use this to support team sites that don't have a team attached, or even communication sites, of course, have no team attached to them. So if you're building out an intranet, for example, and you want to come up with different templated sites for your intranet, very common. Orchestra can definitely support that as well. But today we'll look at a team. As part of this team, I have a name, description, picture, but where the real power of it comes in is you noticed while I was in Teams, I was showing you a pre-built team that I have and I put a lot of time and a lot of effort into. Now that I'm in Orchestra, all I need to do is basically point Orchestra's template here to an existing workspace. And you might have noticed I had that one called Orchestra. I can get this in, project template. All I need to do is a quick search for any of the existing teams I have in my environment and attach it here to my workspace template. And now what I have the power to do with that connection is I can say, I want to clone all the channels, all those channels that I had in there. Within those channels, I want to clone all the tabs. I want to remove those pesky wiki tabs that no one likes. Maybe I want to copy the membership, the security, any third-party applications that are part of that. And of course, all the underlying SharePoint pages and content, which may be documents that are preloaded into that library. And even planner plans, like I showed you, we can copy all of that over as part of that template, making it much more dynamic and versatile over time, right? So if ever I'm updating this template, let's say in the future, we've evolved the way we handle projects and now I need a new channel to support that. The only change I would have to make would be to come in here, add a new channel to this list, and Orchestra will pick that up the next time it goes and creates a workspace. Every time it does a new provisioning job of a workspace, it'll go and check and do an extraction of everything that makes up that workspace. And we can do some great things in here like handling that governance, but making it largely imperceptible. We can apply sensitivity labels and let users choose some sensitivity labels that may make up things that your organization are doing. You can apply permissions. You can apply a minimum threshold for owners and members and say, you know, a team cannot be requested unless there's at least 2 owners and 2 members. We can apply things like very simple or even multi-step approval workflows and make sure that every request for a workspace goes and gets the right approval before it actually gets created. And we can apply things like a naming policy, which can be tremendously valuable in Teams when you consider that you have this left-hand navigation in Teams, and basically all you see in your Teams is a little image and a name, right? So that makes that name of that team so much more important because that's really all we have to go on when we're looking at our list of teams, right? All of us that have that Teams experience, there's only really one way to sort and manage our teams. Another thing we can do, and I'll show you how this can be applied, is we can apply metadata to our teams. So for instance, let's say you wanted every team to be tagged with a location or a division, or maybe both. And I'll show you there's a number of ways that we use that information that makes the tool come together for us. And one of those ways is through the Orchestra directory, which our end users will always access through a dedicated Teams app. You see here I'm in the Orchestra app on the left-hand side amongst all my other applications like the Viva Insights, Connections, etc. And one of the tabs that our users will see is the Workspace directory. And the idea, the philosophy for the directory is to give people a much more open and transparent way to see all the workspaces that currently exist. You don't have to use it that way, but that is a really good way to help that first step towards avoiding duplication and redundancy of content is to let people at least know what is already out there. So we have a great search here where I can do a search for my template will come up here, of course, but any of my teams in here will come up. Any of my SharePoint communication sites or team sites will come up. And I have now the ability to filter by not only static things like, oh, I want to see all the teams that are private, but I can also now see the metadata that I've applied. So imagine I'm a new project manager and I want to just get a sense of what are some other projects that we've done, let's say in the African continent, and that relate to our accounting division. I've only clicked here, 3 or 4 buttons, and I already have a much more manageable list that I can look at. Okay, it looks like we have about a little bit under 10 workspaces where we've done that kind of work before. And this for me as an onboarding is going to be invaluable. I can reach out maybe to the owners of these teams and maybe see if I can get access to 1 or 2 of them and get a sense of what was done previously. So rather than me going out and creating another Project Mulligan workspace, which we see all the time, I at least know here one is already out there, right? So this is kind of that first step in helping with that problem. Now, another thing that I'll show you from the end user experience is how do we go about making requests, right? So I showed you a beautiful template and I showed you a very quick preview of some of the configuration we can do for the template. But what about people needing to request workspaces? Well, that is a core part of the Orchestry team's application, of course, as well. What you can do as an organization is come up with a number of pre-built workspace templates, one of which I kind of showed you. But you might have a number of them, and you can even target different workspaces to different groups within your organization. So for example, maybe you have some internet templates, but you only want your HR or your marketing team to be able to request those. You can hide certain templates for some groups and show them to others. So let's open the one that I was showing you and let's see what a user would see. So I'm going to go and request a client project workspace. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that and say that I want to continue. And here we get into a really good wizard experience where I can make this request more modular and say, okay, I'm going to start with this template, but let's see what other features I can add that my organization have made available to me. So maybe I want an event calendar. I'm going to add that. And maybe I suspect that I'm going to be having to manage a lot of risks on this project. And this might just be a SharePoint list that I've pre-built as a template for my organization that everyone can use. So rather than now having this problem where everyone is managing risks a different way and everyone is managing tasks their own way, you can put some governance, but make it again largely invisible here. So instead of letting people choose and have to figure it out, which is frustrating and overwhelming, I can just add to this catalog of features, let them pick it, and they can be dynamically added to my request. I can do the same thing with document templates. Most organizations have some templates that they're willing to say are organizational templates. You might have a lot, or you might just have a couple, but you can let users choose to say, oh yes, I'm going to definitely be doing some press releases. I'm also going to be definitely launching some fact sheets. So they can add some document templates to their request and move forward. And this is where we see that metadata piece come in, which is completely configurable. So every organization can come up with their own metadata or use no metadata at all. And of course, they can make some metadata available on some templates and not others. So I'm going to go again and say that again, this is another project. I'm putting myself in that new project. It's again in Africa in accounting. And I'll show you what this looks like when I get to the next screen. And this is showing you a demo of the power of the naming convention. So we have a naming convention in place that we've attached to this template. I'll zoom in a little bit and you can see this purple text right here. And this is a pre-built name that's going to get appended as a prefix to my workspace. So let's say my project is called Computer World. I'm going to do a new project with Computer World, and you see the green text is getting dynamically appended to my pre-built name. So without the user having to think about it and remember what a naming convention should be, or even harder, let the administrator have to rename the workspace after it's been created, we just take care of that all automatically based on the rules that you've set. As part of this, we also do some smart things, like we do some checks on the name. So with every name request, we do a validation. So let's say I tried to create a new team here called marketing. Immediately, Orchestry is telling me, actually, hang on, we already actually have a team called marketing with the exact same name. And we even have a whole bunch of similar names. So One thing you might want to do before going forward is have a look, is this team maybe just something you just didn't know existed and happen to now need access to? Or maybe there's other ones that are similar that, again, with trying to combat that sprawl a little bit, we should instead direct you to, rather than creating a whole new one. But let's say I'll go back to my computer world example. My name validation has done a check, and it's actually saying there's nothing out there with the same name, so I'm probably in good shape to proceed. Another thing we're working on right now, which we're about to launch, is a length check here, because one problem we often see with teams is they end up with very long names that, you know, tend to get chopped off. So this is a bit of a tongue-in-cheek example, but if you put a team name in like this in Teams, it's actually not going to stop you. But what you'll find in Teams is that you're only going to see a bit of this name, and then it'll be cut off with a ... ellipsis, and you won't ever see the full name. So one thing we're going to do in the next few weeks is make sure that you can put a limit so that you never end up with names getting cut off in your Teams experience. So I'm just going to click continue here, and now I'm in a section where I can see the channels that are going to get added. These are, you'll probably recognize some of these are getting pulled directly from my live template. But I can add other channels based on suggestions, like maybe I want a dedicated channel for budget and finance, or I can add my own custom channels. Maybe I know that I'm going to need a channel for auditing, because we expect this project will get audited. So I'm going to call a channel audit and throw it in as part of my request right from the get-go. The last step before I submit this is who should be part of this team. And here you see that I'm enforcing that minimum threshold, which really helps with that problem of ownerless and memberless teams, which is a very common problem we see. Imagine you have every team has one owner, and it's Joanna. Joanna happened to take another opportunity at another organization. Joanna has now left. We have all these teams with no owners, and no one's really keeping an eye on them. So one thing you can do to help that, of course, is make sure that there's a couple owners, and maybe even a default owner like I have down here, which is, in this case, I've said Adele should be added as a default owner because she is the lead of the project management office, and she should really be an owner of all the projects. Let's see if I can think of other names in here. I think we have a Diego in here. I'll add him. Everything is now happy. I've met my minimum threshold. I can see a quick summary of my request, and when I'm done, I send it off. This is then going to go for an approval, which I'm happy to show you guys, which someone else will get based on who you've identified. And again, even multiple steps of people, if you would like to do that, is definitely possible. But now, what about all the stuff you already have, right? And this is kind of the piece that Anthony was alluding to. You may already have a big problem. You might already have thousands or tens of thousands. We've seen clients that have 500,000 teams in their environment, and they're already scrambling. They're already in a chaos state. And this leads us to the life cycle management part of the tool. And this is one piece that Anthony was showing. The first piece we have is a dashboard, which is meant to be kind of the day-to-day place to go to see a consolidated view of a lot of information that, frankly, a lot of this does exist in M365, but it's all in different places. It's hard to get to, and it's difficult to see in one single view. So it's hard for administrators to really get a sense of what's going on without spending hours of their day running reports. So here I can see in my environment, I have 906, almost 1,000 workspaces. I have a really high active rate, which is great. I can see the breakdown of my workspaces across types. I can quickly see how many are public, private, inactive, how many of them have only a single channel and maybe need a little bit of help. I can see as these workspaces are going through their different life cycle stages, I can see where they are all at in that. And I can even see what do things look like in this environment over time. And this is obviously a demo environment. So you see in May, I did a lot of provisioning, and in the previous months I didn't, but that's just a reflection of a bit of not a real environment that I'm in here. So dashboards are great. I think everyone likes a pretty dashboard, and wait till you see the next revision we have coming for this dashboard. It'll be even better. But a big problem I think that we're trying to solve is not just giving you information, it's also giving you tools to do something about that, right? And that's a key difference. There's a lot of things out there that give you dashboards. You could even build one yourself with Power BI if you have a little bit of knowledge there. But the challenge is, okay, you're telling me I have 13 inactive workspaces. What am I supposed to do about it, right? As an administrator, that becomes a real big leap from understanding to action. So what we have built into this is not only just dashboards, but also insights behind them that give you a much more detailed view of what's going on. So for example, I've jumped into my inactive workspaces and I can see very quickly here, I have a communication site called Marketing Social Event that's been inactive for 163 days, a good deal of time. I can drill into this workspace and see a little bit more about what's going on. It looks like, well, part of the problem may be that there's only one owner here and no members, no guests. I can see there's no page views or visits. As an administrator, I can go and see, where did this team even come from? Where did this site come from? I can go see the history of the audit log and see, okay, this was requested back in 2021, it was approved, but I don't really see any activity since then. And I definitely don't see any users other than myself. So this is probably an oopsie on my part as an administrator. And this is something that probably is a good candidate for archival or some kind of archival. So let me show you how we handle that, because every company is different. And even within a company, you're probably not going to want to treat all your workspaces with the same method of archival. An example I often use is, maybe a project, you might be comfortable with archiving it after 90 days or half a year of inactivity, but maybe a department site, you probably want to give it a little bit more breathing room before you archive it, because a department usually is going to live on for a much longer time, if not forever. So let me show you some examples of what we can do, and then I can pause and maybe take any questions you may have. For all your types of workspaces, whether they be teams, team sites, or communication sites, you can build independent retention or archival policies. And we allow you to do that through a number of different methods. We don't force you to just delete, but of course you can. So let's say that for this policy, you would say that after a whole year where this has not been touched, go ahead and delete it. But you might say, you know what, we'd rather take a bit of a softer approach. Maybe after 3 months, we're going to do what we call an archive in place, where we say, don't delete that team, but maybe within that team, let's set the status to archive. Let's go in SharePoint and remove that SharePoint search content out of the search results, so it's not clogging up everyone's results. Let's rename this group and add the word, let's say, archived at the beginning, and maybe even the date that it was archived. And you see here with a few clicks, I'm going to rename this existing workspace with the word archived and the date on the front of it, so I know when it was archived just by looking at the name. Other things I can do is I can say, you know what, we've built up a lot of version history in that workspace. I could have 500 versions of all documents if it was really very active. Maybe I just want to retain the most recent version, and I can delete the rest of it because that's just taking up space in our tenant. And I can do the same thing with pages and even lists if they're available. But a very likely thing we might do is maybe we want to remove this from being searchable in Outlook. And probably you're going to remove all of the current membership. And maybe you're going to want to now assign the ownership to some administrator instead. And we also let you say, extract the permission configuration so that if you ever need to restore this team, you have a record of who the members, owners, and guests were prior to the archival, and you can flip this back to active if you need to. So that's a preview of just one of the many options we allow you. And of course, you can create all of these different options, different versions to suit your needs. But this is what's going to help you over time automatically keep a better handle and keep your environment in a better state and prevent some of that sprawl and duplication that's inevitably going to ensue when things are getting created at a rapid pace. What do you think, Anthony? Are there other sections here within the life cycle that you wanted to go through?
No, I think that's been a really good coverage of that. I know that the first time I saw that dashboard, especially when we worked with another client, it was just a real eye opener, because it was information I've been searching around trying to write PowerShell to extract for a while, yeah, just to see that dashboard was fantastic, because it was really the starting point of being able to get a grip on what was happening within the environment. I think you didn't show the actual bit where the team was created, but when you went through the approval process, so you set the template up, go through the approval process, and then you can show that there, the request bit there.
Yeah, so this is a really important part of the process, right? Is being able to have visibility of all the requests that are being made and what are their current statuses. So I can see, this is a lot of workspaces we're creating on a day-to-day basis, and you can see the status of these are all provisioned. The computer world request, I never got it approved, right? So let me show you what that looks like. That'll issue a nice email that will allow any of the defined approvers to come in, and they will see a nice screen that will give them a sense of where the request is at. Okay, it looks like a request has been created and right now it's pending approval. I can tell from this screen that it's first going to the PMO for approval, and then it's also going to Alan in IT for a final approval, which is a two-stage approval. You don't have to be that heavy. You could do a lighter approval if you like. And I can have a quick look at the workspace. Some of the nice things I can do here is, as an approver, maybe there's a typo or maybe there's a mistake that's been made. Instead of having to just blanket request this, maybe I could just need to go and change the name, right? So what if actually there's a mistake here? It's not actually Computer World. We're doing a project, it's Computer Planet. I'm just making an example, right? Where I need to change that. And instead of rejecting this and making the person restart, which is such a pain, I can just go and make a change, right? And I can even update the description. I can update a few things here, like the owners and members. If I say, oh, you know what? I know that we should also have Christine in this project. I know that just because I happen to be familiar with this project, I can add her in and save. And instead of sending this back, I can just go ahead and approve it. Yeah. For today's purposes, I'm just going to do the administrator override because I want everyone to see this actually get triggered. But this is showing me the summary of everything that was in the request. I'm going to approve it, and I can actually watch in real time. This will get provisioned. What it's going to do is going to go look at this beautiful template I showed you in Teams with all these channels and all these tabs, and it's going to go and retrieve that template, and it's going to immediately start creating it for me and send me a notification when it's complete. So now I've gone end to end with a request, including the approval, and you can basically within a few minutes have a completely built out workspace rather than just a bare bones team with a general channel and you having to manually then go and create all the extra pieces that you want there to be.
Yeah, I mean, being someone who has sat one weekend and created over 100 departmental teams for one of my clients, which I don't think I got paid for. This is just music to my ears, really. That ability to set some standards and then just replicate that, and for it to go away and do that, the creation of those teams is absolutely fantastic. And getting away from what we've done with a lot of clients, which is saying, put a manual process in, don't let it become a free for all. Put a manual process in place, create a Microsoft form, have people fill that in to request a team, and then the whole manual process that kicks off. This makes such a big difference, and it doesn't just make a difference if you've got very complex teams. Even if you've got fairly simple teams, it's brilliant to be able to get them automatically created in a consistent way. The other thing I like is there's a kind of system information tab on each, which is created for each team. Don't know if you can show that one, because that works well with the directory as well.
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work on this tab as well. Just so you know, right now it shows some basic information about every team, and it can be added to any channel in your team, and it will automatically show information about that team. I'm just going to pick one at random. maybe it doesn't make sense. Let's say I'm going to add it here to the help and support. Well, one of the things we include in the product is what we call a team information tab. So if you go to add a tab, you will see an orchestrate tab available here. And from the drop down right now, we can say that we want to show this team information tab and add it. And like I said, you can add this to any channel in any team, and it will dynamically pull information about that team, and has a lot of, what I find very useful actually is the links. So I find myself when I'm working in a team, I'm bouncing between the documents, the SharePoint site, the planner plan, the notebook. Sometimes they're hard to get to. And some teams might have 5 or 6 planner plans attached. I don't know if you see that, Anthony, but sometimes you have a lot of planner plans and a lot of notebooks. This screen will give you always a summary of all of them that are attached to this group, and I can immediately jump to any of them just with a click. So, oh, I want to get to this notebook. It dynamically creates these links for me. Oh, I want to get to the planner plan. It will jump me over to that. And I can also see, like Anthony said, the current owners and current members at a glance, and even contact them right from here if I'd like to.
Yeah.
One thing
useful.
Yeah, one thing we're working on, Anthony, right now, which I don't know if I've shown you, is totally expanding the purview of this tab, because I think right now it does give some good information, but we feel there's so much more that we can show here that would be useful to a team owner. So for example, what does the content flow and active usage of your team look like to an owner? Maybe I want to see that to see what's happening in my team. Or maybe I come in here, I've been away for a week, and it dynamically gives me a summary of what I've missed over that last week, right? And I just need to catch up. So all of these things we're thinking about integrating into this tab and making it just basically the central linchpin now of your team, so that anything you need to catch up on, anything you need to try to accomplish, this can be a starting point going forward to help you kind of navigate that team.
Yeah.
So thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, we've certainly used this the Orchestrate tool in 2 different ways. You know, the first one is to kind of get an existing environment that's out of control and pull it back in control. Certainly getting archive policies in place and getting the lifecycle management and getting some establishing some standards across the existing teams, but then using the creation process and that approval and the profiles and templates to just make sure that whatever happens from now on is done in the way in which we've chosen. I think the point I really wanted to make with the first few slides was that Teams is a great product. It's incredibly feature rich. It supports an organization in a fantastic way to support communication and collaboration and make that more efficient. But it was just really forced on us quickly and adopted very quickly, and lots of mistakes were made at that stage. And Orchestrate is a tool that allows us to bring that back in order. So yeah, I hope that's been useful. David, have you got anything else you wanted to share with us? Maybe some other reports.
The only other thing I'd mention is we do also ship with what we call insights, which are pre-built reports, which also help you kind of manage that chaos, right? So we have different reports that are intended to show different things. So for example, I would like to see, of my teams, how many of them have been customized in any way? I want to see all the ones that have not been customized. They have 0 channels, 0 tabs, only the basic libraries, no lists. This might be a team that I can work with and say, maybe we didn't do a good job on adoption with you, and we should maybe look at, is there opportunity for using some more of the feature set, right? Or maybe you're trying to find out all the workspaces that have guests enabled, right? So I can quickly see that. Or maybe all of the workspaces that have the word test in them, because let's face it, every organization has a few of those, and they usually are not needed anymore when we look into them. Another one that's common is like, I want to see every workspace where Johanna is a member or an owner, right? So I can do a quick view and see, okay, this person has just left the organization. Let's have a quick look through and see at least where she's an owner. Let's make sure that there's someone else there in case that someone else needs to carry on the work of that project. And this is a space that we're constantly iterating based on feedback. So we got, some feedback from clients that they said, we really want to see a dedicated workspace content overview for every workspace, how many group items, how many lists, pages, documents. So that one we recently rolled out. The customizations is a new one. But a lot of these really give you some good insights, I think, around things that are happening, and give you, from this view, the action piece, which is really important. And how I attach these to policies is I might say, okay, show me all the inactive workspaces. There's a bunch of these, and a lot of these actually have no policies to get archived. So I could say all 4 of these, they're inactive. I'm going to assign in bulk a policy to them all to make sure that they all have some kind of archival that's going to happen. Some of these are teams and some of these are SharePoint sites. Doesn't matter. I'm going to pick the right policy for each of them. And in bulk, I can assign those policies, and then they will start to trigger when the thresholds that are defined within them are met. So that's where the action piece comes in, right? It's not just data, it's also data that allows you from right here to kind of take appropriate action, because now you have the right information.
Yeah, that's
so
what.
Just wanted to add that piece.
Yeah, that's what I really like about this product, this solution, is it's not just giving you the information, it's giving you the tools to address the issues that are there. And I think all of us who run Teams environments know that there's a certain an element of them being out of control. It's today's the day to really get that back under control. And I think Orchestra gives us some really good tools to enable us to do that. So, David, thank you so much for that. That's been
No problem.
really useful. If people who are listening to this are interested, or I don't think we've had any questions, and I know from previous things that a lot of people will come back and listen to the recording of this, but do fire your questions across to myself. That's anthonyc@computerworld.co.uk, or your account manager. We can arrange a further conversation on this, and a kind of trial environment to maybe give you some insight into how much what the state your team's environment is in. Yeah, we would love to hear from you, and thank you very much for your time today. And thank you, David, for that amazing demonstration of the product.
Oh, no problem. If there's any questions, I'm happy to stay on. And like you said, Anthony, we have the free trial for anyone that wants to give it a whirl. The installation takes about 10 or 15 minutes. It's very pain-free, and there's no consequences. If you choose to take it out after that 28-day, you just continue on as you were before. So yeah, do not hesitate to reach out to Anthony or myself if you have any interest in that, or just want to see more on a specific part of the product. We'd be happy to do that.
That's great. Thank you very much, David.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
Anthony.
you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone,
Cheers.
for joining. All right. Bye now.
Bye.